Welcome back, everyone. This is Dr. Kalishwari, Assistant Professor, Department of Management, Krishna Jayanti University. So today I'm here to talk about the sampling techniques, which is one of the important parts of statistics, which plays a major role in deciding what kind of techniques or methods or statistical techniques you're going to follow on the particular set of population. So without the base of population, your research cannot be continued. And it is based on the techniques which you can select a particular population as per the need for the study. So there are different techniques of selecting the sample, and that is what we are going to discuss in detail in the upcoming slides of this particular video. So sampling techniques or method is based on two types of sampling. That is, one is probability sampling and another one is non-probability sampling. So probability sampling is classified into four, that is simple random sampling, clustered sampling, systematic sampling, and stratified random sampling. Likewise, non-probability sampling is classified as convenient sampling, consecutive sampling, quota sampling, purposive or judgmental sampling, or snowball sampling. So based on all these different types of techniques and the need for the study and for as per the accuracy or the availability, the sampling techniques will be adapted by the researcher in order to classify or to identify the results of the particular set of population which this data is collected for. So probability sampling is normally said to be a random selection method where the eligible individuals have an individual chance of participating in the sample collection process. Normally, probability sampling is a sampling technique which is used while your sample size is known. Suppose if you are collecting a data for a particular group which you know the definite population, then you will be using a concept from probability sampling. Likewise, if you know the sample size of that particular group, like 1,000 people or 2,000 people or 10,000 people, if you have a definite size of that particular population, then you can adapt towards probability sampling. And when it comes to the types of probability sampling, it is broadly classified into simple random, systematic, stratified, clustered, and we'll be seeing it in detail in the video. So when it comes to the simple random sampling method, it is a technique where every item in the population has given an equal chance of being selected for the data collection process. Since the item is selected entirely dependent on the chance or the probability, this is also said to be a method of chance selection. And it represents a random person from the entire sample. For example, suppose if we want to select a simple random sample of 200 students from a school, we can assign a number to each student in the school database from 1 to 500 and use a random number generate to select a sample of 200 students. So this can be a generally simple example of how simple random sampling works. Then comes the systematic sampling method under the probability sampling technique. So this is another method where the items are selected from the target population by selecting the random selection point and selecting the other method has fixed sample. So it is calculated by dividing the entire population size into a desired population size. So for example, suppose if a name of the 300 students of a school are sorted in a reverse alphabetical order, and if you wanted to select a sample in the systematic sampling method, then we have to choose a 15 students by randomly selecting a starting number, say 5. From 5 number onwards, we'll be selecting every 15th person. So if you are following a systematic method of selecting each sample from the entire population, a systematic format is followed, then it falls under the systematic sampling method. So suppose if you have 300 students and you wanted to find out the student in a systematic order, then you are fixing a number of student based on a particular numerical order where every 15th person will be taken for the sample. Then comes the concept of stratified sampling. So this is another sampling method falls under probability sampling, which the entire population is divided into a smaller group to complete the sampling process. So it is based on few characteristics in the population, maybe height, weight, or literacy level, the employment level, all those things can be a part of stratifying an entire population into different group. For example, there are three bags, ABC, each with different balls. Bag A contains 50 balls, bag B contains 100 balls, and bag C contains 200 balls. So we have to choose a sample of balls from each bag proportionately. Suppose 5 balls from bag A, 10 balls from bag B, and 20 balls from bag C. So this falls under stratified. So if you are conducting a sample for a particular set of group or particular target group, and if you wanted to conduct in different criteria based on their characteristics, then the suitable way of selecting a sample is through stratified sampling. Then comes the concept of clustered sampling. So in this method, the cluster or group of people are formed from the population set. So the group has similar significant characteristics. They may have equal chance of being a part of the sample also. So this method uses both simple random sampling for the cluster of the population. Again, in this method, the entire population is, characterized or divided into clusters based on some criteria. So for an example, an educational institution has 10 branches across the country with almost the number of students. If we want to select some data regarding facilities and other things of that particular institution, we cannot travel to each and every part of that institution. So hence we use random sampling to select 3 or 4 branches from the available 10 clusters. And all these 4 methods can be understood in a better manner with the help of this kind of sampling. So this will help us in understanding, like from the 10 different branches, you are selecting only 4 branches. From that 4 branches, the whatever data you wanted to collect, you can use this cluster method of collecting when your sample is extremely large. So this is a pictorial thing of sampling. Then comes the concept of non-probability sampling. This is another method where the sample is based on subjective judgments rather than the random sample selection. So this type of technique is followed when your sample size is actually not known or definite population size is actually not known by the researcher. So then we go with the non-probability sampling. There are types of non-probability sampling. Likewise, it is convenience sampling, consecutive sampling, quota, judgmental, snowball. All these samplings falls under the concept of non-probability sampling. So first one is regarding the convenience sampling method. The samples are selected from the population directly because they are conveniently available for the researcher. So the samples are easy to select and the researcher did not choose the sample that outlines the entire population. Suppose if your sample size is not known and based on the convenience of the researcher, if the researcher is choosing the sample size based on their own convenience, then it is said to be the convenience sampling technique. For example, in a research, the customer support service in a particular region, we ask your few customers to complete a survey on the particular product. This is a convenient way of collecting the data. Still, we only surveyed customers taking same product. At the same time, the sample is not representing all the customers also. So likewise, if you are collecting some data and from that particular departmental store where you want to know the level of sales of that particular product, then you are going with the convenient sampling, not rather than specifically choosing a population. Then comes the concept of consecutive sampling. So the consecutive sampling is another sampling method where it's slightly small variation in convenience sampling, where the researcher picks a single person or a group of people of that sample, and the researcher researches for a time period to analyze the result. So for example, it can be a particular people who are undergoing some treatment for a medical cause, or they are undergoing a treatment for some other purpose of relaxation. All those things can be categorized under this consecutive sampling. And then comes the quota sampling. So in this quota sampling method, the researcher forms a sample that involves the individuals to represent the population based on some qualities or some traits. So the researcher chooses the sample subset that brings the useful collection of data that generates the entire population. So this will help only to focus on that particular quality of people, and the researcher will conduct that research on that particular set of group only. Then comes the concept of purposive or judgmental sampling. So purposive sampling is based on the researcher's purpose through which they are gaining or they wanted to gain knowledge on. As per their knowledge in the instrumental or creating samples, there are chances of obtaining high accuracy answers. So to minimize these kind of things, most of the time the researcher follows this purposive or judgmental sampling method so that they can focus on minimizing the errors. Then comes the snowball technique. This is a method where the sample has a triad that are difficult to find. Suppose if you are a researcher who is conducting research studies on a particular set of group, like cancer patient or any uh, vulnerable section like drug abuse or child trafficking person. So in that case you can't go and find the entire population, and that is highly sensitive also. So if you find one person, through that person if you connect to the next set of level of persons, then that is said to be snowball's technique of collecting the sample. So likewise, all these techniques are followed by a researcher for selecting their own sample based on the availability or the availability of time or the requirement of the researcher. So all these techniques help the researcher define their sampling based on the importance, time, and the accuracy and the availability of all the resources when we are conducting a research. So this is about the sampling techniques. We'll meet you in the next video.